The whisper of gelato. The sun is setting over Florence. Shadows lengthen across the piazza and the air grows cooler, kissed with the scent of sugar and cream. On every corner, a familiar sight appears. The shining window of a gelateria, its colours glowing like jewels behind the glass. Pistachio, the colour of new olives. Raspberry, bright as sunset. Vanilla, pale and calm as marble. Tourists linger, choosing their scoops, while locals wander by, greeting one another with a smile and a spoon. Gelato is not merely dessert here, it is ritual. Yet behind the sweetness, behind the swirls and cones and laughter, a quieter story unfolds, one about lore and craft, and the surprising ways that culture decides what is real. For even something as joyful as gelato, that soft, melting miracle, can find itself in the crosshairs of legislation. In 2024, Italy debated a curious proposal, a law to regulate gelato itself. Not its flavour, not its price, but its air. Yes, you heard that right. The amount of air allowed inside a scoop. To some, it sounded absurd. To others, a necessary defence of tradition. But like all things Italian, it was about more than the details. It was about identity. Gelato, more than ice cream. To understand why anyone might care about the air in gelato, we must first understand what gelato truly is. The word itself simply means frozen. But in Italy, gelato is not the same as ice cream. It is denser, silkier, served at a slightly warmer temperature. It melts not with a crunch of cold, but with a sigh. Smooth, immediate, comforting. True gelato is made with milk rather than heavy cream, churned slowly, lovingly by hand or small machine. Where industrial ice cream might contain up to 50% air, artisanal gelato holds only 20 to 30%. It is the difference between something puffed up and something full of heart. And so, when whispers began that some shops were cheating, pumping in more air, cutting costs, dulling the flavour, it wasn't just a culinary sin. It was a small wound to the Italian soul. The cradle of sweetness. Italy's love affair with frozen desserts stretches back centuries. In the Renaissance, long before refrigerators, noble families stored snow from the Apennines in deep cellars, mixing it with honey and fruit to create early sorbets. Legend tells of Bernardo Buontalenti, an architect and artist from Florence, who, in the 1500s, invented a creamy frozen custard for the Medici court, a forerunner to the gelato we know today. Imagine the delight of that first spoonful, sweet, cold, and utterly new in a world without refrigeration. From there, the art spread like sunlight across the peninsula, from Sicily, with its citrus sorbets, to Venice, where merchants returned from the east with sugar and spice. By the 18th century, Italian gelato makers were famous across Europe. They opened shops in Paris, Vienna and London, small outposts of summer joy in cities often grey and damp. gelato in the modern heart. In the 20th century, as Italy rebuilt itself after war and hardship, gelato became a quiet symbol of optimism. A scoop cost little, yet it carried the flavour of hope, of sun, of simplicity, of togetherness. From the post-war piazzas to the seaside promenades, every Italian childhood held the memory of that first dripping cone. But with prosperity came imitation. In the age of tourism, new shops appeared, bright, fast, modern, churning out heaps of neon-coloured gelato that looked spectacular, but tasted like air. Tourists, unknowing, paid happily. Locals frowned quietly. And so, over time, a tension grew between the artisanal and the artificial. A question of integrity. For Italians, food has never been only food. It is story, memory, philosophy. A plate of pasta tells of land and lineage, a loaf of bread, of patience and skill. Gelato, too, carries its own code, a promise of care and authenticity. To betray that, to fill it with air, to use powders instead of cream, to rush instead of craft, feels to some like a small act of cultural betrayal. And so it is perhaps no surprise that one day in Rome a handful of lawmakers began to ask, should we protect gelato by law? The law takes shape. The idea surfaced quietly, almost like a joke. A few senators drafted a bill, not to ban gelato, of course, but to preserve its authenticity. The proposed law set a limit on overrun, the technical term for air in frozen desserts. Any gelato exceeding a certain ratio could be fined, up to 10,000 euros for misleading consumers and tarnishing tradition. A fine for fluffy gelato. It sounded like satire. But behind the laughter, the intention was sincere. The bill's authors spoke of defending small artisans, those who spend hours perfecting their pistachio or hazelnut, from mass-produced rivals selling clouds instead of cream. The world reacts. When the news broke, it spread quickly across newspapers, talk shows, social media feeds. Some praised the proposal as noble, a stand for craftsmanship in a world drowning in shortcuts. Others mocked it as yet another example of Italian bureaucracy. First, they banned pineapple on pizza, one headline joked. Now they'll arrest the air in your gelato. But the discussion struck a chord. In its humour, there was truth. For this was not merely about dessert, it was about how modern nations protect their heritage in an age of speed, tourism and profit. And so, quietly, people began to talk. About quality, about honesty, about what makes something real. Tonight, as you listen, picture those Italian streets again. The glow of the gelateria window, the hum of conversation, the small miracle of frozen cream and sugar. Somewhere inside that simple scoop lies the heart of a country, still trying to balance pride and progress, still whispering, let's keep what is ours, authentic. And as the night deepens, the debate continues softly, like the churn of a slow gelato machine, spinning history, air and sweetness together. The history of gelato. Before we can understand the law, before the debate over air or the pride of artisans, we must wander back in time, back to where it all began, long before refrigeration, long before blenders or freezers. Humanity discovered the simple magic of frozen sweetness. And like so many good things, it began with curiosity and snow and sugar. Picture the mountains of Sicily centuries ago. Traders from the east arrived in Palermo and Catania, bringing exotic sugar, lemons and almonds. Locals mixed snow from Mount Etna with fruit juice and honey, creating the world's earliest sorbetto, a fleeting, shimmering taste of summer preserved in ice. In the Arab world, they called it sharbat, from which the word sherbet would later grow. Sicily took this idea and gave it art. With each generation, the recipes became more refined. Sugar replaced honey, fruit purees replaced juices, and slowly the texture became softer, smoother, a whisper of what gelato would become. The islanders would carry snow down from the mountains to underground stone pits lined with straw, ancient freezers called nevières. There, in the dark, the snow would wait for summer, packed tight until the heat returned, ready to cool the tongues of kings and poets alike. The Renaissance invention. By the mid-1500s, Italy was alive with genius. Florence, cradle of the Renaissance, shimmered with marble and imagination. Artists, architects, scientists, all of them searching for new ways to shape beauty from nature. Among them was a man named Bernardo Buontalenti, an engineer, stage designer, and cook for the Medici family, whose curiosity knew no limits. It was Buontalenti who, according to legend, presented to the Medici court a dessert unlike any before. A custard of milk, cream, eggs, sugar, and a touch of wine, frozen slowly with a mixture of snow and saltpeter. The guests were stunned. It was neither drink nor solid, neither sweet nor cold in the way they knew. It was gelato, though they did not yet have the word for it. Florence became its birthplace. From there, the frozen dream spread north and south, carried by chefs, courtiers, and travellers. In Venice, the merchants who had once traded spices now traded recipes. And across the Alps, European nobles began to crave what the Italians alone seemed to perfect. Across the Alps. In the 1600s and 1700s, the art of gelato became a quiet export of Italian pride. Gelato makers travelled abroad, carrying with them the secrets of cold. They were often humble men, from mountain villages, artisans of patience and frost. In Paris, Italian confectioners opened small shops that served sorbets and creams in delicate porcelain cups. French aristocrats adored it. Even King Louis XIV was said to have gelato served at Versailles, a rare delicacy of the time. In London, Italian immigrants brought gelato to the working classes, selling it from barrows and carts. Children would gather with pennies, calling out, "Hokey pokey," a street cry that became part of the city's soundscape. The Italians smiled. Their little taste of home had crossed borders and oceans, yet remained unmistakably theirs. The age of machines. For centuries, freezing was an art of patience. Snow and saltpeter, ice houses and hand churns, every batch demanded time and touch. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Steam and steel entered every kitchen. In the 19th century, inventors built mechanical churns capable of freezing faster, smoother, cheaper. Gelato spread further, from aristocrats to ordinary families, from cafes to street corners. But with ease came imitation. Some vendors, eager to save on ingredients, began adding air, water and stabilizers. The delicate texture that once spoke of care became lighter, too light. A spoon would sink into a puff of cold nothing. It was still called gelato, but those who had known the old ways could taste the difference. The 20th century revolution. After the First World War, Italy was rebuilding. Small businesses blossomed again. Tailors, cobblers, barbers, and of course, gelato makers. In 1927, a man named Ottorino Catabriga of Bologna invented the first automated gelato freezer, a machine that mimicked the slow, careful churn of the human hand. His invention helped preserve the integrity of the craft, allowing artisans to maintain texture and density without industrial shortcuts. The golden age of Italian gelato had arrived. After World War II, as the world fell in love with Made in Italy, gelato became an ambassador of national pride. Tourists arrived from every continent, and the first thing they sought was not fashion or Ferrari, but a cone of pistachio, a cup of hazelnut, eaten under the Roman sun. Gelato was no longer just dessert, it was identity. Soft, simple, unmistakably Italian, artisanal versus industrial. Yet by the 1980s, something began to shift again. Global brands, eager to capture the taste of Italy, launched frozen desserts labelled gelato, mass-produced and shipped worldwide. They were smooth and sweet, but often heavy with air and sugar, designed for shelf life, not soul. Meanwhile, in Italy, true artisans kept to the old methods. Local milk, fresh fruit, small batches churned daily. They woke before dawn, mixing flavors by instinct, not formula. Their shops were small, their pride enormous. Walk into one of these gelaterie even today, and you'll see the signs of authenticity. Muted colours instead of neon hues, stainless steel tubs covered with lids, and flavours that follow the seasons. Strawberry in summer, chestnut in winter. These are the clues of the real. The gelato is dense, silky, almost alive. You taste milk, fruit, nuts, not air. A heritage at stake. As tourism exploded in the 21st century, the line between craft and commerce grew thin. On Rome's Via del Corso or Venice's narrow lanes, shop windows gleamed with mountains of bright gelato, fluorescent, piled impossibly high, shimmering under spotlights. They looked irresistible, but often were imposters, made with powdered mixes, stabilized with artificial thickeners, whipped full of air to make each tub seem abundant. A single machine could turn out hundreds of servings a day, each one as hollow as the last. For the true artisans, it was painful to watch. Their heritage, a craft passed from grandfather to apprentice, was being reduced to spectacle. And so quietly they began to ask for help. Not for money, not for fame, but for recognition and maybe protection. The seeds of the law. It was from these whispers that the idea of legislation first arose, a way to safeguard the soul of gelato against the inflation of air. The proposed law would not dictate flavour or recipe. That would be un-Italian after all. Instead, it sought to set a simple standard, that gelato should remain true to its craft. Real ingredients, minimal overrun, and transparency for the consumer. To outsiders, it sounded absurd, a nation famous for passion legislating dessert. But for Italians, it made perfect sense, because to them, gelato is not a luxury. It is a birthright. And so from the snows of Mount Etna to the piazzas of modern Rome, the story of gelato is a story of care, a reminder that even the smallest pleasures deserve respect, that the things we love most are often the things we must protect even, or especially, from ourselves. In the next part, we'll step into the present, to the Italian Parliament, where chefs, lawmakers and skeptics alike debated whether joy itself could be measured in percentages. The law itself, the battle for authentic gelato. It began, as so many Italian stories do, not with confrontation, but with conversation. A group of chefs sat together after a food festival, in Florence perhaps, or Bologna, talking not about politics, but about air. One spoke of a friend who had gone out of business, unable to compete with chain gelaterias selling tubs of whipped foam. Another lamented that tourists could no longer taste the difference between something crafted and something concocted. Someone sighed, stirred their espresso, and said quietly, "Perhaps it's time the state intervened." The drafting of the bill. A few months later, in early 2024, news broke of a proposed law, modest, almost comically so, to protect artisanal gelato. It was introduced in the Italian Senate by a small group of bipartisan lawmakers, led by Riccardo Nencini, a veteran senator known for his affection for both Italian culture and common sense. The bill, just a few pages long, was titled simply Norme in materia di tutela e valorizzazione del gelato artigianale di qualità. Rules for the protection and promotion of quality artisanal gelato. In its pages was a curious number, 30%. That was to be the maximum overrun, the amount of air legally allowed to be whipped into gelato. Any product exceeding that limit could not be marketed as artigianale, and its producer could face fines of up to 10,000 euros. A tiny law for a vast debate. The air in the gelato. To understand the passion this stirred, one must understand what overrun really means. When gelato or ice cream is churned, air is naturally incorporated into the mixture, giving it lightness and preventing it from freezing solid. Industrial machines, however, are designed to whip in far more air, doubling the volume while halving the cost. A litre of mix can become 2 litres of gelato, its texture soft, its flavour faint. To the tongue, it feels smooth. To the artisan, it feels like cheating. Real gelato, slow-churned, dense, carries a kind of quiet gravity. You can taste the milk, the fruit, the nuts. It melts slowly, richly, honestly. Too much air and it becomes hollow, a cloud pretending to be cream. The intent behind the law. The senators behind the bill insisted this was not about punishing success, but about protecting honesty. As Senator Nencini explained to the press, "We are not against innovation or industry. We simply believe that consumers deserve to know what kind of gelato they are eating." The law also proposed clear labelling, distinguishing gelato artigianale from gelato industriale. For small shop owners who work before dawn to prepare fresh batches each day, this recognition meant everything. "It's not about pride," one artisan told La Repubblica. "It's about fairness. We make it by hand, and yet we compete with the air." The public reacts. At first, the idea sounded quaint, even funny, social media filled with jokes. The Italian government wants to regulate the air in our gelato, one headline teased. Next, they'll tax the bubbles in Prosecco. But as the laughter faded, others began to reflect on the deeper meaning. Why shouldn't a country famous for craftsmanship defend the integrity of its most beloved foods? After all, Italy already had laws protecting Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, San Marzano tomatoes, prosciutto di Parma, and even Neapolitan pizza, complete with rules about crust thickness and wood-fired ovens. Why not gelato? Was it really so absurd to ensure that the national treasure in every cone contained more substance than air? Voices from the counter. In Bologna, a gelato maker named Marco Bassi spoke to reporters with quiet conviction. "I've been making gelato for 40 years, he said. "Every morning I go to the market for fruit. I pasteurize my milk, I roast my nuts, I measure everything by instinct. My gelato lasts one day, no more. Tomorrow I make it again." He paused, looked through his shop window at a neon-lit competitor across the street. "They make 10 times as much, and it never melts. If the law helps people taste the difference, then maybe it's not such a bad thing." Across Italy, many artisans agreed. To them, the law was not about control, but clarity. Yet others, even within the industry, disagreed. "Too much bureaucracy," said one shop owner in Milan. "If your gelato is good, people will come. We don't need laws for that." A symbolic debate. Soon the conversation outgrew the dessert itself. Newspapers began to frame it as something larger, a symbol of Italy's eternal tension between tradition and modernity. Could a country that built its fame on craftsmanship still thrive in a world of speed and convenience? Or must it legislate beauty to preserve it? The debate echoed older Italian dilemmas about handmade shoes versus factory brands, small vineyards versus supermarket wines, local trattorias versus fast food chains. Gelato, it seemed, had become the stage for a much bigger question. One about the soul of the nation. Inside the parliament, in the Italian Senate, the debate was polite, almost affectionate. Lawmakers smiled as they discussed air content and milk ratios. One senator even brought samples of gelato from his local shop in Siena to assist the discussion, he said. Laughter rippled through the chamber. But behind the humour was genuine care. They spoke of the need to preserve artisan work, to protect small family businesses, and to educate consumers. One lawmaker compared the bill to protecting a painting or a piece of architecture. Gelato is a masterpiece of simplicity, he said. When we lose authenticity, we lose part of ourselves. Criticism and caution. Yet not everyone was convinced. Some economists argued that the law could be impossible to enforce, requiring inspectors to measure air percentage in every batch of frozen dessert. Others warned it could stifle innovation, making small producers nervous about experimenting with texture or modern recipes. "Where do we draw the line?" asked a critic in Corriere della Sera. "Do we legislate cappuccino foam next? Do we fine the baker whose bread rises too much?" The country smiled again. But the conversation kept going. On radio shows, in kitchens, in classrooms, people began to talk about values, about honesty, authenticity, and the meaning of tradition. The law's fate. As of late 2024, the law had not yet passed. It lingered in committee, debated, adjusted, occasionally resurrected in the press whenever someone mentioned a gelato scandal. Yet, even without enforcement, its message had already done its work. Tourists began to ask more questions. Is this gelato made fresh? Do you use local milk? Artisans began proudly displaying signs. Gelato fatto a mano, senza aria, o senza si. Handmade gelato, without air. The law had not yet changed the world, but it had changed the conversation, the air of meaning. And perhaps that was the point all along. Italy did not need to criminalize fluffy gelato. It needed to remind itself and the world that quality is a choice. A scoop of true gelato contains not only milk and sugar, but respect for time, for texture, and for the invisible thread that connects a craftsman to centuries of heritage. In the end, whether or not the law ever passes, its spirit remains alive. Not in the courts, but in the small gelatery, where artisans still rise before dawn, freezing a little bit of Italy's heart into every scoop. And perhaps that is all the law was ever meant to do. Voices and reactions, the country speaks. When news of the Gelato law first broke, Italy reacted exactly as Italy always does, with passion, humour, and a touch of drama. In cafes and kitchens, on buses and park benches, everyone had an opinion. Because in Italy, food is never just food. It is conversation, identity and poetry, served daily with extra sugar and strong opinion. Laughter first. The first reaction, naturally, was laughter. Morning talk shows opened with jokes. Late-night comedians imitated senators measuring scoops with rulers and air gauges. Next, they'll test the humidity of a tiramisu, one quipped, or fine my grandmother for too much love in her lasagna. Newspapers ran headlines that bordered on surreal. Italy declares war on air. Senate fights fluff. The great Gelato crackdown. Even politicians smiled, knowing that sometimes absurdity is the best kind of publicity. But beneath the laughter, something unexpected began to happen. People started talking about what real gelato meant. Chefs and artisans speak. On television interviews, celebrated gelato masters appeared, their aprons dusted with sugar, their hands stained with fruit. "This isn't about bureaucracy," said Simone Bonini, owner of the renowned Gelato Carapina in Florence. "It's about protecting culture. When you taste real gelato, you taste craftsmanship, you taste care." Another artisan in Rome smiled and said, "If they can regulate the weight of a coffee espresso, why not the air in gelato?" The audience laughed, but nodded too. For once, the word law didn't sound cold. It sounded affectionate, a sign that even a government could care about something sweet. Social media buzz. Online, the debate took on a life of its own. On Twitter, or X as it was now called, hashtags began to swirl like melting cones. Hashtag no air in my gelato. Hashtag gelatogate. Hashtag pure scoop. Hashtag only in Italy. Influencers filmed themselves taking the air test, placing a spoonful of gelato on a scale, declaring dramatically, "If it floats, it's fake." TikTokers posted side-by-side comparisons of real versus industrial gelato, one dense and slow to melt, the other collapsing in seconds. The comment sections filled with warmth and nostalgia. My nonna would approve. Protect the pistachio. Make gelato Italian again. What began as satire transformed into something oddly sincere, a collective yearning for authenticity in a world that often feels mass-produced. The tourist's view. Tourists, of course, had their say too. Many had long believed that all gelato in Italy was authentic. "I thought it was all amazing," said a woman from Chicago, laughing as she stood outside a Florence gelateria. "Now I'm worried I've been eating air for years." Travel bloggers began publishing guides titled "How to Spot Real Gelato in Italy." They listed the telltale signs: muted colours instead of neon, steel lids covering the tubs, seasonal flavours, and no mountain-high piles in the window. Soon these videos had millions of views. The debate had gone global, and Italy's little law had become a kind of cultural ambassador, a global curiosity. From London to Los Angeles, newspapers picked up the story with delight. "Italy wants to find fluffy ice cream," wrote The Guardian. "Rome cracks down on airy desserts," declared The New York Times. In France, some food critics envied the idea. "If only we could regulate bad croissants," one joked on television. In Japan, where craft and tradition hold deep respect, the proposal was admired. "Quality deserves defense," a Tokyo confectioner told NHK News. And in America, late-night hosts raised mock toasts with pints of ice cream to the Italians for caring more about dessert than most countries care about democracy. It was affectionate teasing, the kind reserved for a nation that loves life too much to take anything small for granted. Inside the gelaterie. In the weeks that followed, something beautiful unfolded across Italy. Small gelato shops began adding handwritten signs to their counters. 100% artigianale, zero aria. Gelato vero, fatto oggi. Real gelato, made today. Some shops even displayed the density of their gelato on tiny chalkboards, turning science into poetry. Customers smiled, children pointed, and artisans felt, for once, that their quiet craft was seen. "We haven't had this kind of attention in years," said one vendor in Naples, "all because of a silly little law." He grinned. Maybe not so silly after all. The politics of pride. As the laughter faded and the headlines cooled, politicians found themselves in a rare position. L'homme s'étoile loved for something gentle. Usually laws divide. This one strangely united. It reminded people that national identity doesn't always live in speeches or flags, but in flavours, in the taste of summer evenings and the sweetness of childhood memories. "If a law about gelato can make us smile," said one senator, "then perhaps it has already served its purpose." Skeptics and the practical ones. Of course, not everyone was enchanted. Some business owners worried about inspection costs or compliance tests. "We don't need the government in our freezers," one large-scale producer complained. Others feared that small infractions could lead to fines or legal confusion. A few critics even suggested that the entire debate was a distraction, a scoop of sweet nonsense in a country facing far bigger problems. And yet even many skeptics admitted that the law had struck a chord. It had made people care, and that in itself felt rare. The emotional undercurrent. Psychologists and cultural commentators began writing thoughtful essays about why this story had captured the world's attention. Some said it was nostalgia, a longing for simplicity in an age of digital overload. Others said it was rebellion, a quiet protest against a culture that rewards efficiency over artistry. Gelato is a metaphor, wrote one columnist in La Stampa. It reminds us that pleasure has texture, that time and patience can still taste better than speed and scale. And maybe that's why, as Italians debated air and cream, the rest of the world listened, because they too were hungry for something real. A nation reflects. On a warm night in Florence, a reporter interviewed an elderly man sitting on a bench with a cup of gelato. "What do you think of the new law?" she asked. The man smiled, watching children chase pigeons in the square. "When I was a boy," he said, "my father took me for gelato every Sunday. One scoop each, and we would share it. It was cold, creamy, and we never talked about laws. We just knew it was special." He looked down at his cup and shrugged. Maybe that's what the law is trying to say. Don't forget what's special. Simple words, and perhaps the truest of all, the quiet legacy. Months passed. The proposal lingered in Parliament, neither approved nor abandoned. But outside, in the streets and kitchens of Italy, the spirit of the law endured. Artisans began forming cooperatives, setting their own voluntary standards for quality and transparency. Culinary schools added new lessons on the ethics of craftsmanship. And every now and then a senator or journalist would smile and say, "Remember the great gelato debate?" It had become a piece of national folklore, half law, half legend, a reminder that passion can exist even in the smallest things: air, craft, and culture. In the end, it wasn't really about air at all. It was about respect for the hands that stir, the patience that freezes, the flavor that tells a story. Every country has its symbols, its flag, its anthem, its monuments. Italy has those, yes. But it also has gelato, a humble dessert that carries centuries of artistry in every bite, and now a tale of lawmakers and laughter too. It is a reminder that even absurdity can be beautiful when it's born of love. And so, as the night deepens, the voices fade, from the chefs and senators, from the tourists and comedians, leaving only the quiet churn of the gelato machine and the sweet, slow rhythm of a country that still believes in flavor, craft, and care. Perhaps in a world filled with noise, that is the real miracle, that something as simple as frozen cream and air could make us stop and think and smile. Reflection and epilogue, the aftertaste of time. Night falls gently over Italy. The chatter of piazzas quiets. Lamps glow golden over the narrow streets, and the scent of vanilla, almonds and roasted hazelnuts still lingers faintly in the air. Somewhere a gelato machine hums its steady rhythm, the slow, patient turning of the metal arms that blend air and cream into something smooth and living. It's an ordinary sound, and yet it tells a story older than any law. The essence of gelato. Gelato, after all, is not simply dessert. It is memory given flavour. It carries with it the whisper of every artisan who has stirred milk by hand, every farmer who has harvested lemons from the Amalfi coast, every grandparent who has passed a cup of pistachio to a grandchild under the summer sun. In every town, from the cobbled streets of Bologna to the breezy piazzas of Palermo, gelato has always been more than indulgence. It is conversation, shared ritual, and the taste of belonging. And perhaps that's why, when Italy began to argue over the air inside a scoop, people cared so deeply. Because they understood that what was really at stake was not air, but authenticity, a law that became a mirror. Many months have passed since the first draft of the proposal, and still the law remains a topic of gentle curiosity, part serious, part legend. But in that strange in-between space, something beautiful has settled. The debate became a mirror, reflecting not just gelato, but the heart of Italian culture itself. For Italy has always wrestled with the balance between art and regulation, passion and policy, freedom and form. You can see it in its architecture, the precision of Roman design softened by the romantic chaos of Renaissance frescoes. You can hear it in its music, the mathematical purity of opera intertwined with the emotional tremble of a single violin. And yes, you can taste it, even in a spoonful of gelato. What is real? Perhaps the most enduring question left by the gelato debate is a quiet one. What makes something real? Is it the texture, the ingredients, the temperature? Or is it the story that lives behind it, the care that someone poured into its making? The truth is, no law can legislate sincerity. No ruler can measure love. And yet it is the attempt, the very idea of wanting to protect something genuine, that makes the whole story strangely beautiful. In that sense, the gelato law may never need to be passed. It already fulfilled its purpose, reminding the world that quality is not an inconvenience, but a form of respect. The rhythm of craft. When you visit a small gelateria late at night, just before closing, you might notice something few people see. The counter gleams, the tubs are nearly empty, and behind the scenes, someone is cleaning the machine. Patient, unhurried, deliberate. They don't speak much. They work by feel, by texture, by rhythm. And if you stay quiet long enough, you'll hear the faintest melody, the hum of tradition, the same rhythm that once filled the kitchens of Florence hundreds of years ago. It's the sound of continuity, of care being passed, hand to hand, generation after generation. And it is this rhythm, not the letter of any law, that keeps Italian culture alive. The power of absurdity. Looking back, it might seem absurd that a government once considered measuring air in ice cream. But perhaps absurdity has its place. Sometimes the ridiculous is what wakes us from routine. Sometimes it takes something seemingly small to remind us of something vast, like how laughter can defend tradition just as fiercely as argument. For every headline that mocked the idea, there was another person who stopped to think, yes, what is real gelato anyway? And in that pause, that small flicker of awareness, the story found its victory. Time, taste, and legacy. In centuries past, kings and popes made decrees about bread, wine, and olive oil, rules that over time became the foundation of culinary heritage. Perhaps, in some distant future, people will look back at this law and smile at its eccentricity, the way we smile now at medieval tax codes for cheese or salt. But perhaps they will also understand what it meant. That Italy, even in the 21st century, still cared enough to defend flavour. It is rare in a world moving ever faster to find a country willing to slow down for something as delicate as taste. And yet Italy does, again and again. The quiet pride. For all its debates and contradictions, Italy's true pride has never been in perfection. It lies in the attempt, in the reaching for beauty, even when it seems impractical. The law about gelato portions, in its strange way, was a declaration of affection. A nation whispering, we still care about how things are made. And that whisper echoes not only through parlours and kitchens, but through vineyards, bakeries and cafes, through every act of craft that insists on doing something well, even when the world no longer demands it. It is a kind of quiet rebellion, to choose care over convenience, the sleep of a nation. And so the story settles, like the last spoonful of gelato melting in its cup. The piazzas grow silent, the shutters close, and Italy drifts into its nocturnal rhythm, gentle, unhurried, timeless. The fountains murmur softly, whispering tales of emperors and poets, of artisans and dreamers, of lawmakers who once debated the air inside ice cream. And somewhere in the distance, the first morning, baker begins to stir flour and yeast. Another craftsman, another ritual, another testament to the eternal rhythm of making. It is all connected, the bread, the wine, the gelato, each a reminder that love, when practiced through skill, can become a nation's identity. Closing reflection. The gelato law may never have passed. It may remain forever a curious footnote in history. But stories, especially Italian stories, have a way of transcending logic. They linger like flavour long after the taste is gone. And so perhaps it doesn't matter whether the law was abolished or forgotten. What matters is that it made us pause, to look, to taste, to remember what is real. The next time you hold a spoonful of gelato, feel its weight, let it rest on your tongue. Notice how it melts slowly like time itself. That moment of quiet presence is the law that truly endures. Sleep now, traveller. Dream of cobblestone alleys and painted sunsets, of laughter echoing through Roman courtyards, of pistachio and lemon and cream. Dream of Italy, not as a country of laws, but as a land of flavour, patience and heart. And when you wake, may the world feel just a little slower, a little sinam luakeg. Seko se pay. Sir. Sahib do Kanafam. Should not inside has been a cat.